What's up, everybody? This is the People Man Talks podcast, and I'm your host, Emanuel Solomon, the People Man. And, I'm an interpersonal skills coach who helps high-performing professionals of color to promote and reposition with power through increasing their cultural, emotional intelligence. I have a passion for working with people of color, professionals of color that are looking to exceed their expectations, their limitations through coaching. If you want to find me, you can go to emmanuelsolomon.com for extra all my content. You can reach me there. Also, if you want to get a free training, you need to go and check me out at emmanuelsolomon.com. You can get your free training. This is a free gift from me to you so that you can take your career or business to the next level. So today on the People Man Talks podcast, I have a very special guest with me today by the name of Dexter Pearce. He's a labor and employment attorney. Not only that, but he is a writer, a blogger, and an activist, and was just recently nominated in the National Black Lawyers Top 40 Under 40 Lawyers in Oregon, okay? And he's my family. He's my cousin. Please welcome Dexter Pearce to the People Man Talks podcast. How you doing, cousin?
Hey, I'm doing well. Are you going to tell me how you spell your last name wrong, or?
Nah, man. I'm gonna just let nature take care of that. How you doing, though? I'm really glad to have you on the show, man. I really like to brag on you too, because you're a part of Black excellence and your family, and that is something that I love to highlight and showcase. So, man, tell me a little bit about this award, man. Tell me about this award.
Hey, well, thank you. I just want to say before that, thank you for the opportunity. Glad to be on the podcast, and you give me a shout out as your cousin. I'm just trying to ride your coattails, so I'm happy to be here. But yeah,
Right.
as you mentioned, National Black Lawyers. It is the this organization that is not new, but relatively new, that was founded to really acknowledge Black lawyers out there. There are a number of prestigious awards that go to acknowledging super lawyers and best lawyers. Surprisingly, not surprisingly, there's not a lot of diversity in those ranks. They're made up, recommended by people who are already on top who look like them. So my firm heard about the organization, National Black Lawyers. I saw students that I went to Duke Law School with getting this award, and then they reached out to me, passed it on to my firm, and they thought this was something that I should be involved in. And we partnered up, and I think I was nominated because I'm the president of the Oregon National Black Lawyers Association.
Okay.
And really, really what it is just, it's a small collection of Black lawyers and Black attorneys out here in Oregon. And someone had to step up. I was able to take the role from someone who had been doing the job really well. And then I got hit with this coronavirus and quarantine. I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate through all that. So,
but it's a big deal. Anytime we're acknowledged nationally on any scale, I think it's a big deal, not only for us as individuals, but for our people to be recognized for things that are that we're excellent in. And so, just the fact that you're being acknowledged in what you do. I mean, doesn't that feel somewhat, give you some sense of pride and that you're on the right track for what you're supposed to be doing in your career?
Oh, absolutely. I think you're right. Just being a Black professional, getting acknowledgement always feels good. It's always hard fought and hard won. So I'm happy to be in those ranks and to be acknowledged. I have a great firm that allows me to do some things and has enabled me to have some success. So,
one of the things also that why I wanted you on the show, on top of being a lawyer, you're also a high performer. I think just the fact that you're being acknowledged for what you're doing is part of that. And within that work of taking time to devote yourself to your craft, to excelling in what you do personally or professionally, personally, I'm also impressed by the fact that you're active on social media for helping different causes for Black and brown folks around that have been oppressed and shedding light on that. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm probably on Facebook more than I need to be, and more that is wise. But as you mentioned, I'm on there a lot, mainly just trying to highlight issues of racial injustice. I started a blog at one point and posted a couple things here and there, but don't do a whole lot of promoting myself. And it's just, I just want people to know, sadly, who's the latest hashtag and what does that mean and what does that require from us to step up and promote real change. So if you saw me on Facebook, you're going to see a lot of complaining about the state of the world, a lot of encouraging white people to step up, both within the religious sense and non-religious white folk, to really take ownership of what's going on and join us in this process to find change and justice.
Man, that's huge, because it seems that we're actually, because we have phones and we have all this new technology, we're able to shed awareness on these problems. But what do you feel like this is going to do? Do you feel like, shedding this awareness is going to eventually bring about change? And how is that going to happen? Or how do you think that is going to happen?
Yeah, I think awareness is the first step in a long series of steps. I think people get lulled into this false security or false confidence that if they've liked something on Facebook or if they shared something, they've done their part, and that's far from the case.
Yeah.
So what I try to do is just make sure people are aware of the issues. But outside of Facebook, I'm having a lot of conversations. I joke with people that I don't even like coffee, but I end up going on all these coffee dates to sit down and walk people through racism and what that means. But what I want to see ideally is that people start connecting the current events and what's going on with political solutions. It's not enough to just feel bad about what's happening or to smile at your one Black friend, but you have to realize that these are politically created issues that need political solutions. And whether that's local government, state government, or the top, I want it to change people's voting behavior and their advocacy practices. So. Okay.
So if I'm hearing you right, your strategy is to work within the system to try to create change. And I hear this. There's a lot of different advocates for both or you got some people that say, we don't need the system. We need to, at least for black folks, and we don't need the system. We go outside the system and do our own thing and create change there.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's others that say, hey, no, we need politics. They influence, our daily life. So we need to be involved in politics, and we need to, our voice needs to be there. And then you got folks that are kind of in between. Can you shed light on both sides?
Yeah, so I don't know if I can say there's a wrong way. And if there's a right way, I haven't found that either. So I won't claim to have figured it out. I think the way I lean almost fluctuates on a daily basis. If you would ask me yesterday, just in light of the latest video of Ahmaud Arbery and his shooting, I've lost a lot of faith in the system, and I don't fault anyone for taking avenues or paths outside of our current system and trying to find a solution. But at the same time, this is the system that we live within and we're forced to operate in. As an attorney, I think that gives me just a leg up, or just gives me some insight into reading legislation and reading laws and understanding what's going on there. And so I want to use my expertise where it's best fit to operate. Again, that doesn't mean that outside the system is wrong or shouldn't be done. I do think we need both. But I feel like my time is best focused right now within the system to an extent, however that's interpreted.
That makes sense, because for me, I'm more heavy on working outside the system, garnished with a little system on the side. You know what I mean? Like I'm more like, okay, like black people, brown people, we need to do our own stuff in a way that promotes unity. Take that work, and then you know go to the systems, and then we got have something to barter with. You know, one of the things that I've noticed, and this is just my personal take, is that you know as we've been looking to impact and have change as black and brown folks, we are missing some of those key components, which is like, yo, we know how to protest, but we're doing a lot of the things that our forefathers did without the understanding of why they did it. And so, you know, you know, when we had, you know, the Montgomery bus boycotts and all these different types of things, we had black unity, and that was our negotiating chip, and that was what we can bargain with in negotiating with white supremacy in any type of way. If you don't have anything to bargain with, then you're going to continually concede. You're gonna give, you know, you're not gonna, you don't have anything really um, to bargain with, because you don't understand, because most people don't understand how we're viewed in the system of white supremacy, and how having nothing to bargain with at the table makes it to where you just have to allow whatever they give you to suffice. And so for me, my stance is we have to focus more of our energy on the unity piece, and having collective work in economics together, first for black people by themselves, and then for black and brown people to connect and have a universal language, and then we can all have something to bargain with when we're coming to the table and saying, hey, this is what we want change, this is what we want move, this is what we want things to look like for our communities. And I think until we do that work, I feel like our political voice becomes more. We just become pawns in a game of which type of white supremacy do we like the best. So that's kind of my take on that.
I don't disagree with any of that. So I think that all makes sense. Yeah.
You know, because most people don't know you, I I want them to know who you are, Dexter. Tell us about your story. Tell us about. I mean, we know you're a lawyer, but what? Tell me about that process. Like, what went on in your upbringing that kind of brought you to this point?
Yeah, I mean that's a broad question, and could go a lot of ways. I'll try to be succinct, and you can stop me whenever you need to. But I'll be cliche and start kind of at the beginning, right? So you know, I have a black dad and a white mom, so I'm mixed. I grew up in this. You know, I grew up in two separate homes. Parents were separated when I was young, and so on one hand, I had everything that it meant to be black, and growing up in the black church. The youth choir, all of that, and on the other hand, so on the other hand, I had just a white mom, white woman and everything that entailed, who was raising, me and my brothers, black children to be colorblind in a world that doesn't allow that option. And so for me, it was early on there, like I was aware I was black. That was never in doubt. But I was trying to figure out how to merge this identity of being black and also being colorblind, and with what my mom is saying, what my dad is saying. And that, it unsurprisingly created some challenges growing up, but but yeah, I had to figure out how to navigate that on my own. I now know the term is, kind of, this racial identity journey that I was on. I was trying to figure that out. But for me, kind of a turning point, I would say was, I almost hate to admit how long it took me, but it was really, and there was little things along the way, but a turning point was probably in junior college. I'd gone down to Texas. This was, it's 2008. So also, the year Obama got elected. Yeah.
That was the housing bubble burst, or really close to that time. Yeah.
Yeah, the housing bubble. I mean, the financial crisis, our last recession before Corona. But I remember being in my dorm room the night that Obama was elected, and then you had a bunch of white, I don't want to say rednecks, but
Oh,
people
you
on the
can say it.
rodeo
You can say it.
team. Yeah, these are
You can
guys
say
who
it
had
on this
rodeo
show.
talent.
This show. You can say redneck. You could, yeah. Well, they were white rednecks and super
There you
conservative.
go. There you go.
Yeah. Yep. Uh-huh.
This 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 small junior college in the middle of nowhere in the panhandle of Texas. Yes, there were white rednecks, guys on the rodeo team, the baseball players, and they were going crazy outside of my dorm room because they were upset that Obama had won.
Wow.
Right? They were breaking tables. I think it was the University of Texas quarterback had tweeted something about Obama being assassinated, and I was in that environment,
Wow.
and it just
Wow.
it brought it home, right? Like these are guys who shake your hands and they go to your games and they cheer for you, but you look at me completely differently when you're looking at me as a black man as opposed to when you're looking at me as Dexter, and
Mhm.
realizing that they saw a different me than I saw. It started kind of changing the way I was looking at these issues.
Wow.
Um, but yeah, so
Yeah. That's huge, man. And I really want to know like those emotions, those feelings of like, you know, how what kind of conflicts did you kind of go through growing up to where you've got you've got a white mom and a black dad, you're in two different homes wrestling with who you are and your identity. I mean, was that a normal thing, or was it just did it just click on and click off every now and then when issue came up, or how was that with you and growing up?
yeah, that's a good question. I would say uh, to answer out of the options, I mean, it was more kind of something that clicked on and off. It was not an ongoing struggle that was always in the back of my mind, but there were a number of events that brought it back up or triggered it or made it an issue. I struggled with confidence a lot as a as a young black kid. I remember again going from my mom's house during the weekdays and going to my dad's on the weekend, and all my black friends in church, they they're about to have a race, and I'm like, well, they're just outside running outside the church, right? And I'm not fast enough. I'm not athletic enough to be in that group, right? I knew I was black, but I still I saw black kids as these, you know, they were cooler, they had more swag, they had more confidence, and that would come through a lot with sports. And it wasn't until I started really playing basketball that I realized that okay, I can do this too. I'm athletic, I can compete, and
Yeah.
we'll set aside all the problematic issues of what that means to view blackness just through a lens of sports. I'm past that now, but at the time,
It's a tool that
blackness
helps
meant
you to
being
grow. I mean, you like, look, people are not playing enough sports or telling their kids that it's important enough to play sports because you learn so many lessons about who you are and your identity.
absolutely.
It's like you push yourself to places that most people don't push themselves to until they become older or until they become more
Mm-hmm.
mature and realize that, oh shoot, I need to start getting serious about my life. Sports can really help you to get a leg up in competition in general. So I think that's great, man. Black sports, white sports, yeah, do it. Yeah, I feel you.
I agree. I agree. And so yeah, in those settings, again, playing sports in predominantly black crowds, I always felt like the white kid there didn't belong. Playing sports in white white schools and white crowds, I was never really even black enough then, right? It was Dexter, you're the you're the black kid, but you're the safe black guy, right?
Yeah.
And so that itself created its own challenges, which that's not unique to being mixed at all, but that it created its own challenges. And so there was these issues along the way where I'm reminded constantly of I don't know where I fit. And
Mm.
I know that now, but at the time I just didn't know where I fit in and what place was for me. So
So it seemed like you talked about a little bit of your awakening. Like there's this awakening period in college where you're like, okay, if if society or if I like to say if white supremacy in that system sees me in this way anyway, regardless of how I see myself, I probably
yeah,
need to start understanding a little bit more about what is this black thing or what does it mean to be black. And I think a lot of people kind of go through that as they grow up. It's like, man, if if I'm getting killed for being black, if I'm getting, you know, shot for being black, if I'm getting less opportunity for being black, shouldn't I at least know a little bit about being black so that I can stand on my own 2 feet?
Absolutely. And I love how you put it. If white supremacy sees me this way, regardless of what I do, I need to understand those rules that they're playing by. And that was the real turning point. You know, again, recognizing that I was black growing up, but still because of my mom's influence, thinking that, you know, I could outwork this if I'm on my best behavior, if I'm smart, if I'm successful, you know, these things won't affect me, right? Like, yes, racism is a thing, but as long as I can get them to like me, I'll be able to overcome that. And
I
you
can
know,
be
it was
OJ.
little reminders.
It's
Yeah,
really, it's really OJ.
man.
Like I'm not black. I'm OJ. Like I don't know if you saw that interview, but no, that was what came to mind because what his stuff was so convoluted because he thought he could outdo or dupe the system of white
Yeah.
supremacy by being OJ, and he found out soon enough that did not work in his favor long term.
Exactly. I didn't have anywhere near the athletic success of an OJ to be deluded into thinking that would work. But I had bits of that mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm getting like, you know, you're going through this process of coming into your identity of who you are. What were some of the books that you read or some of the inspiration or people that kind of helped you to develop who you are along the journey?
Man, so starting just people first, like, you know, my dad and my stepmom, I mean, were huge influences. You know, they were always heavily involved in the Black church, and I was surrounded by Black people, and I saw Black excellence, and that was modeled for me. And I realized not everyone has that. So even when I was trying to figure out who I was, you know, my dad was being recognized for honors and awards and was moving through the corporate world, and so I had a roadmap set for me. So that I figured out what I wanted to do. I could always look to that. And I'm sorry, I've got a
No, you're okay.
2-year-old.
You're okay. That's okay. That
You gotta go downstairs with mommy, okay? Mommy's not nice, is what I'm being told. I apologize. Give me one. Let me just.
No, you're all right.
Let me
You're okay.
All right. I apologize again for that.
Nah, it's okay, man. That's his family. We're good.
All right. So the question was, you know, people and books that I turned to. I would say it was really, despite even kind of that initial awakening in junior college, for me it was law school, when I was kind of heavily into, you know, analytics and academics, and data arguments, when I started turning to books and materials out there. And I was in law school when Ferguson was going on. So
Okay.
I'm getting both the legal education and the real world treatment of Black people. Not that it was new, but just front page of the news every day. So I started with The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. It's a thick, heavy, dense book, but it's all about how, you know, we went from slavery to Jim Crow to mass incarceration, and how mass incarceration has been used as the new Jim Crow. And that, it didn't open my eyes to a new reality, but it gave me the terminology to understand and talk about what I've been seeing just as a Black man growing up. And that changed my mind in so many ways. So that's my go-to. It's a dense one, but
okay. That's what we need to be. That's what we need to be reading then.
that is I recommend it to everyone, but I realize, you know, it's not the best one. So really, in law school, I started doing a book a month towards the end of law school for the last, you know, 4, 5, 6 years. Of those books, 75 to 80% of them have been focused on one way or another dealing with race or African American literature. So I've got a handful of books that I could you know, recommend to people depending on what they like to read, what their level of engagement is.
Give us the top 3 for people that are just, for Black folks that are looking to kind of grow or develop in their identity or understanding the systems of white supremacy or any of those things that kind of stick out to you. 3 books that you can recommend.
Got it. So again, New Jim Crow is always on there. How to be anti-racist, How to be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi came out earlier this year. He really breaks down, just what it means to be a system of white supremacy, what racial inequities and racial policies look like. That's a must read. And then, man, to pick the last one on that list is tough. I would say, I mean, you can't go wrong reading Ta-Nehisi Coates. I think he paints a picture of the issues, but in kind of a narrative way, and it's just easy to understand. So maybe you don't want heavy academic literature, but you just want to pick up something and just get insight and get words to describe, processes that you've grown up with. Ta-Nehisi Coates does a great job of that.
Okay. Appreciate that, man. And one of the things I wanted to kind of pivot into was when I hear you talk about, reading a book a month and some of the habits that you've developed that have kind of helped you to grow professionally. Reading is so fundamental, so key to developing new mindsets and paradigm shifts, also creating strategies for being able to operate on high levels anywhere. So it's like other people have kind of given us different blueprints and things that they've lived through so that we don't have to go through that without knowledge. And so how do you, as a lawyer, you guys read so much, you have to read, continually, constantly. What kind of system have you kind of adopted to be able to take on so much literature and so much reading?
I don't know if I have a great system, but I annotate, I highlight, and there are notes in everything that I read. Whether I'm reading, a case brief, reading articles for work, or just the New Jim Crow. Like if you look at my copy, it's every couple of pages you have notes in the margins, you have highlighted, you have book tabs and bookmarks and dog ears. For me, I think I have to highlight, and I have to go back to a lot of stuff to retain it. Some people are naturally better at that than I am, and they read it once and they got it. Mm-hmm. I've got to go back to it over and over again, and that just helps me knowing how to find it and pick it up on the page.
Yeah. And then what about like the capacity to be able to read that much? Did it grow from just reading more, or did you already have like a high capacity for reading? Because for me, it takes me a long time to read books. And so I do a lot of, I'll read a book and then I'll also listen to an audio book, because I can get through audiobooks a lot faster, and I'll take notes on the audiobooks, and it helps me to be able to kind of stay abreast of things. But when I'm reading a book, I'm not a fast reader at all. So it might take me like, for a 12 chapter book, it might take me like a week and a half to finish it before, some people can just knock out a book in a couple of days. That's never been my ability or my strength. So for you, did you always have a high capacity for lots of material, or did it kind of just grow through time?
So I've always been an avid reader. I mean, I loved reading. I remember, being in elementary school, you'd have the book competitions where you get, so many points for how many pages you read or books you complete in a week. Okay. And I would just fly through those. And that was my parents from an early age, reading with me. I remember my dad and I had a 2-person book club where it was just, we'd pick a book, we'd read it, and that was our bonding thing, right? Now, having kids, my time for reading is reduced significantly, as you can understand. But I do a lot of my reading on the Max. So I commute in and out of work, and I'll 15, 20 minutes at a time on the Max, get a chunk of reading in. So with the quarantine, I haven't been reading as much because there's no Max to jump on. But it was a habit I've had. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's huge, because what I've been doing a lot of studying on, how people learn, and one thing about reading that I've heard is that from a lot of experts is that in order to read more, you have to read more. And I know that sounds crazy, but the more that you read, the terms, the words, the phrases become easier, because our brain has to process the information. It has to understand the information before it can process it. So depending on the types of books that we read, we won't be able to process that information as fast unless we have more exposure to it. So
Mhm.
it's like, it's basically like you have to put yourself in an environment to read more. And the more that you read, as you said, from a young age, that was instilled upon you. It makes it easier as you continually grow.
Mhm. I would agree with that wholeheartedly, and it's interesting to hear you say that because the more I read on certain topics, whether it's for work related or it's just in personal, you get more familiar with the ideas, you get more familiar with the phrases, and it allows you almost to read more efficiently and faster when necessary. So I'll be reading the case, and I can kind of see where it's going. I can jump ahead and pick out what I need to really focus on, and it cuts my reading down, significantly. So it's not speed reading. I wouldn't say that, but I can read much more efficiently when I need to, if I'm not trying to just waste time in a novel. So.
And that goes to the 80-20 rule, and I think that rule goes, it's in so many different areas. Like basically 80% of what we're learning, or 80% of what we're doing, is not going to get us the results that we need. Only 20%, is going to get us what we need. And so it's like that 80-20 rule is like this focus principle of, basically 20% of this is created by this guy named Vilfredo Pareto. He created the Pareto principle. He learned from all these. He's an Italian economist, and he learned from all these different folks. He realized that the wealth was distributed in a specific way, and he found that 20% of the homes had 80% of the wealth. And he started seeing that pattern in so many different areas of his life. And so now uh, people have coined it the 80-20 rule, which is basically like, you can do a lot of different things, but only about 20% of what you're doing is going to get you the results that you really need. And so, like what you just talked about was the same thing with that focusing. Like you figured out through your exposure to reading that when you need to break down information, there's only there's specific keys or indicators that you need to focus on that are going to give you more of the meaning and more of the um, understanding of the words that you read.
Exactly.
I
I'm
want,
glad to hear you explain that because I was an econ minor and remember the term Pareto, but I had no idea what it meant. So thank you for refreshing that and breaking that down for me.
yeah, man. I that was really interesting to me because so many leadership principles are coming from that um, Pareto principle now, and everybody, 80-20, 80-20, and a lot of people don't know what that means. It's that, a very, very small portion of your effort is going to help you to become the the person that you need to become, as far as production, right? Like if you're a basketball player, like only 20% of your skill and attribute is going to help you to get to that next level. Like,
Mhm.
you know, there's this book. I don't know if you've heard of it. By what's his name? Oh my gosh, I don't know why I can't think of it. Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell.
Malcolm Gladwell. Yeah,
He
I haven't read it, but I've heard of it.
talks about this threshold principle, kind of like after a certain point, and he was measuring these different, or he's talking about these different athletes, right? Like after like about 6'6", height matters very little in most positions. He
Mm.
was talking about like for guards, right? He's like it was like after about 6'6", or something like that. I don't know what the exact threshold was, but height started to uh, height did not increase um, productivity for basketball players, right? It was like it had to do more with your shooting percentage, or your ability to play defense, or whatever the case was. And I really
Uh,
took that into consideration, which is like, so many people generalize things so much because it makes it easier for us to comprehend the world. But there's these threshold principles, and it's like, well, your height matters, but only to a certain extent. Oh, well, yeah, like your ability um, to work hard matters, but only to a certain extent. Your ability to
Mm-hmm.
do this matters, but only to a certain extent. And then once if you don't understand what that threshold is, you'll continue to keep on doing the same things and be dumbfounded because you're not getting the results that you need.
Uh-huh.
And so it's kind of that balance of really understanding what that 20% is that's going to help you to get that, that 80% of your results. So I'm just glad that you kind of you talked about that in your reading, and it also goes outside of that. But let me talk about this because we kind of got into your story about being mixed, or mixed race, or however you coin that. But you started to understand your identity. You started to understand the importance of being black, and knowing about that. Tell me how that kind of how being black and that identity piece soaks into your work as a lawyer.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, I was in law school when Ferguson was going on. So there's no way I could take my understanding of the law, of the Constitution, of cases that I was reading, and not be forced to reckon with how they apply to Black people, right? Like, I'm reading the case, I see what it's saying, but I know the idea of what's reasonable for a Black person is completely different. One example that I think of, I was studying for the bar, and I was reading a question about whether or not a seizure had occurred, right? Whether or not the police had actually stopped this person, whether they were free to leave. And I think the hypothetical is, a person surrounded by 3 officers, they're asking him questions, but they haven't actually arrested him. So technically he is free to leave. Like that's the right answer. He's free to go. Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, there's no way a Black person in this situation could just walk off with no consequences, right?
Right.
Like
right.
That's not how, like, we wouldn't think we're free to leave. And as soon as that 3rd officer or that 2nd officer, as soon as the 1st officer shows up and surrounds us and is questioning us, that's an arrest has been made. We've already been seized. Like, our freedom has been stopped and impeded on. And so I remember answering the question and knowing what the right answer was, but it just ate me up inside. This is not a reasonable standard for a Black person. So with that, I took that into, like, well, what can I do with the law that is addressing these things? Mm-hmm. You mentioned at the outset that I'm a labor and employment attorney, and just in short, I'll really focus on the employment side. But if you think of HR issues that become legal issues, just workplace discrimination, hiring, firing, advising employers on how to deal with disabled employees, pay overtime, et cetera, that's what I deal with. And I won't get into all the stats about, workplace discrimination and how that impacts a person of color or a Black person specifically. I'm assuming people know that. But I wanted to be involved with that. I wanted to be able to counsel employers and advise them proactively. Here's how we deal with this thing. Here's how we deal with these issues. Here's a policy that leads to equity. I do a lot of diversity and inclusion trainings, and here's why you can't do X. So I was able to kind of put that into my daily basis and what I get paid to do, apart from what I want to do for fun, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and you talked about these 2 worlds. You talked about the world of, this is what the law says. At the same time, you being Black, you got to think about some things that there's another law, and that's white supremacy. And so you have to understand both of these, and you have to have a certain kind of intelligence on how to deal with the law and then the other law. And this law that governs how things are move and act is white supremacy. And I think you don't get a better understanding of that until you are either a oppressed person of color. I think that's the only real way you can grasp the dynamic nature of it. I talk to a lot of what I call either non-melanated or Caucasian folks, about different issues. And I feel like there's a huge gap. There's a huge gap in their ability to understand what we're going through. A huge gap in empathy, and it's because they don't have to deal with it. So their mind can't travel to the places that it needs to travel to in order to really feel us. That's why even within our um, our efforts to educate non-melanated folks, Caucasian folks, I only really work with non-melanated or Caucasian people that are trying to move away from whiteness, because the identity of whiteness, in my opinion, is really where the behavior of white supremacy comes from. And so, like, this whole understanding that there's two worlds that we live in, man. There's like a white world and everything else, and
Yeah.
we don't, and if we don't um, adjust, if we don't find how to cope in this world of whiteness without losing our identity in the process, and that's really important because a lot of us have lost our identity in the process, then we can't produce, we can't be the creative, beautiful people that we are. And so what you're doing is amazing work, because you're taking the law and you're also giving a cultural perspective, an ethnic perspective,
Mhm.
to where, like, if this were to apply to you as a black man or a brown man or a brown woman or a black woman, you're going to have to see the law in a whole different light.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can give it that cultural overlay, right? That cultural lens.
Yeah.
But you said something that was really important, and I mean, you said it was important, that not losing yourself in the midst of this, right? And I know that it's so hard not to do, and I would say that has been, and the 4 years I've been at the firm has been the biggest change, right? Because I came in very aware of diversity and inclusion issues and wanting to make that a priority from the beginning. But I also realized I'm at the bottom of the totem pole, not just as a black person, but as a junior associate at a big law firm, right? Like, you have no power, you have no authority, no weight. And so I was faced with, how much noise can I really make? How much concern can I bring to these issues before that starts harming my career? And for a lot of people, they just, it's just not worth it for them, right? Like, I'm not called to be a martyr. I'm not called to raise noise. I'm just trying to succeed and get a paycheck. And I understand that, but for me, I couldn't do that. There was an issue. There was an issue maybe 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, with the Oregon State Bar, which is the organization of attorney that oversees attorneys in Oregon. A number of specialty bars, diverse bars, and what that means is organizations built up of diverse attorneys, the Hispanic bar, the Asian bar, the Black bar, et cetera.
Okay.
They published a letter condemning the rise of white nationalism and the rise of violence and the normalization of white nationalism. And it was, of course, in response to Trump and everything going on with that. And they said, look, this is going on. As legal minds and legal staples in this community, we need to speak out on this. They got a lot of pushback, and some firms were wrestling whether or not they could support this statement. And I remember having the conversation with my firm about what are we going to do, and a lot happened, but ultimately we ended up issuing a statement, a press release supporting the statement. And at that point, throughout that process, I realized that, look, I have value to the firm, not just as someone who can read a case and write a brief, but as a black person here, that adds value. And if I don't embrace that, I lose out on a part of who I am. And so I've been able to make more noise than is probably wise or helpful at times, because I'm comfortable with my role and I see the value that adds, regardless of potential repercussions down the line. And so if I don't speak up, that puts the burden on a younger attorney to do so. So I'm talking too much now, but being able to,
That's amazing, and I needed that. I needed that because this is what cultural emotional intelligence is all about. It's about knowing when and how to do things, about knowing yourself, and about knowing when and how to speak up and how to become the voice or or the influencer that you know that you can be. And I think it requires a lot of different factors, and I won't name all of them now, but I think that this understanding of your cultural identity within the context of the social environment that you're in, and on top of that, your your skills with people. Because if you didn't have a good relationship, or if you didn't understand how to communicate your ideas and thoughts, it don't matter how passionate you are about anything. And so your ability to be able to do that was a result of what I call cultural emotional intelligence, which is um,
Mhm.
that interpersonal skill within your race, within your culture or ethnicity, and being able to express that appropriately at the right moment to get the results that you need. So that was actually a perfect example. um, what were the key things that kind of made you decide that, hey, this is like, being a lawyer is really what I wanted to do? Was it something that you've always had in the back of your head, or was it like, why did you want to be a lawyer?
Yeah, I mean, some kids have that. Look, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer from the time I was 5 because my parents said I was good at arguing. That wasn't me at all.
Okay.
I talked earlier about my dad, being in the corporate world. So in my young head, it was just, I want to go into the business world. I didn't know what the business world meant, but that was the path I was setting myself up for.
Okay.
When I really started thinking about law, though, I was in junior college at the time. And I mean, this is gonna, expose some things about me, though I've changed a lot. But I was still a not a far right wing, but I was a conservative, wrestling through some things. And there was a Supreme Court case dealing with whether or not a Christian group at a school had the right to exclude members based on sexual orientation and become Christian and insist that their leaders be Christian in everything they believe in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as a Christian, as someone in the church, like I saw the Supreme Court case, and I was like, how is this even a controversy, right? Like Christians should be able to discriminate however they want against whoever they want, and they can insist on what it means to be a Christian. And so the Christian school lost, and I was like, oh, this is terrible. I want to go in the law and make things right. Right now, I've come a long way in terms of what I see as justice, making things right. But that was really what planted the spark. And at the same time, my mom was going through some custody issues with my youngest brother, and just seeing what it meant to be, someone without a lot of means in the law system, in the legal system. Like, I was like, I want to be involved in that. So I kind of had these two tracks coming together where I could help people and I could right wrongs. And that had me thinking of law school from, my sophomore year in college on.
I have a client that I work with that's actually a lawyer. And one of the themes, it seems like, for the reason why people want to be lawyers is they have a deeper passion to defend.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I want to help the people that can't help themselves because I can. I mean, that just seems like a pattern that I continually see, and it sounds basic, but it's not, because everybody doesn't feel like that, and everybody doesn't have that call or that passion. And so, like, these things kind of seem like they come together. It's like, I see how things work, and I have a skill in a specific area, and I think I can use those two things to defend, to find some way to battle back on something that um, is not profitable or is not helping society in some way, and I want to be able to use my voice to do it.
I mean, that's certainly part of what drove me to law school. I remember getting to law school. By the time I'd gone there, I had these shaping experiences, and I wanted to be a prosecutor, right? When you talk about defending, they're on the opposite side, but defending justice and wrongs against society was how I saw it. And so I was, I'm going to be a prosecutor. I'm going to put away bad people. I'm really going to fight for what's right. Soon after, I became just more aware of what it meant to be a prosecutor, how the system was set up against people of color, Black people specifically, poor people. And I realized there's no way in good faith I could be a prosecutor. Even if I thought I could control some of these cases, I wouldn't have enough power to change the system from within, right? It's like, you know, people who think, you know, it'd be like me saying, you know, I could be a black person in the KKK and I can change the organization through my presence alone.
Bixby.
Right?
What was his name? I know you watched the Chappelle Show, right? What was his name?
Oh,
Clayton
man.
Bixby?
Clayton
The
Bigsby.
black white supremacist. He was blind and he didn't.
Clayton Bigsby. My wife is the biggest Chappelle Show fan, which still surprises me. But yeah, he wasn't trying to change the organization. He wanted to be in the organization.
Right. He just did. He was blind. Yeah. Right.
So I realized, yeah, I couldn't be a prosecutor, but employment was a way that like I could deal with real issues. You know, people's money, people's job, people's livelihood, employment discrimination, and I can figure out how to advise them and resolve these issues ahead of time. So it was that call to defend, though, that had me on that path.
What talents and abilities were those that you felt you could compete in this field?
I would say, I mean, I always thought I was a pretty good writer. And not writing like an English major or novels or fiction, but just being able to write in ways that were concise, that were convincing, that were persuasive. And I mean, that's mainly what you do as an attorney, particularly as a junior attorney who's in litigation, right? Labor and employment is a litigation type field. You're writing briefs and memos. And I remember that was something I excelled at. When I went to Duke. I'll back up there. Going to Duke, you know, it's a T14 law school, so top 14 in the country.
That's huge.
I was around. Yeah, it was a big deal. It was a big deal. I was around geniuses. I mean, people who are going to be clerking for the Supreme Court. And I realized very quickly that I'm a smart person. I do a lot of things well, but there's a different level of love for the law around in this room, right? And so I realized where I fit and where I belong.
Okay. So you had a measuring stick of like, okay, this is kind of where I don't want to be up here. I want to be somewhere in the middle.
It helped me balance things out, right? Like if one is someone who's, you know, you're going to be on the Supreme Court, and 10 is someone, you know, and 10 is the opposite, where I'm just hanging out a shingle. You know, I'm gonna, you know, go into business for myself. I could see where I fit and what worked for me. And yeah, I took big law, which is probably closer to, you know, the top, but not academia and not a judge. Of course, you can't just walk into that. But it was a helpful measuring stick to find out where I fit and really how much I wanted to give to it too, right? Like, I don't want to I don't want to get up my off time and just read a law book or the rules of evidence, you know, and be a Supreme Court judge. Like that's not in my path.
It's almost like you got a sense of the industry based off of the competition you were around beforehand. A lot of people kind of have to find that out as they're in the industry. And then they're like, dang, like, I don't really want to do this. And I've already spent 6 years and a few $100,000 and like, this is not where I want to be at. And so, I mean, mentorship is huge in that area, you know, where you can have like people that have already been there who can kind of report back and tell you what it looks like. But it looks like you were able to kind of do some deducing of, you know, based off of the friends that you were around, because probably some of those friends that you were around at Duke Law had some parents or had some, you know, family members that were in law already and could kind of give you, you know, an understanding of what the reality of being a lawyer is, right?
I mean, I definitely had a great group of friends where I was exposed to some things, but also the way law school works is, I mean, you do an internship after your first year. And that can be, you know, nonprofit work. A lot of people do. I was fortunate enough to get a job at a law firm. And so my first summer, I had a 10-week internship where I could actually see what it meant to be an associate, to work at a big law firm and what that was going to bring. And at that point, you can gauge, is this what I want to do, right? Like it's not the exact replica of what your career will be, but it's a very good insight. And so I went back to start my second year of law school knowing, okay, this is where I want to go. This is what it's going to take. And this is how I get there.
You mentioned that you had this ability to write as one of your talents and abilities. And you also were able to gauge kind of what level of law you wanted. But was there any other things that you felt about yourself that could, that kind of gave you a leg up to be able to compete?
I mean, without being sounding arrogant.
No, this is the time you have to talk. Give the people what they need, because this is really important. That introspective. This is what I do well. Because people that don't know what they do well, they end up settling for things that they don't really want to do. And their ability to understand their own talents and abilities and what they're also not good at allows them to be in positions to succeed more often than people that don't. So I like, this is amazing. Go ahead. No, tell me, brag away.
I like how you put that.
Yeah.
No, yeah, that I like how you put that. So with the qualifier that the people that I work with all do these things well. I'm not saying that I'm the best by any means at these, but I mean, the ability to think critically, the ability to communicate clearly, both in writing, research well, and then the ability, I think, to be objective and open-minded, right? Like my wife would probably say I'm pretty stubborn. I think I got the right answer and I stick with it.
Yeah.
But I feel like I can look at evidence and I can acknowledge where my argument has a weakness and where it's strong, and figure out how to address that. And that's a key skill to have, particularly when you're arguing against very smart people on the other side. They're giving you a 20-page brief of here are their best arguments, and you got to be like, okay, well that's actually a good point, right? So now how do I address this? And you can't just be closed-minded and say, no, I'm right because I'm right. Here, I gave you a good case, now deal with it. You have to be able to see your weaknesses, and judges appreciate that. And I think I do that really well. Even on my Facebook conversations, I don't have as much time for patience with people anymore. But if you can give me evidence, I'm willing
back
to
every now and then.
Yeah, I'm willing to rethink positions. And yeah, I mean, I think that's not unique to me, but the education that I've had, the upbringing I've had, makes that easier and definitely makes it a strength.
And that's empathy. Being able to see from others' perspectives, understand people's motives, and also understanding the emotion behind the words, the emotion behind what's being said. And I know that's harder in written form, right? Because it can be very objective in certain ways, but that's a form of empathy. That's a skill set to be able to kind of say, all right, I know how I think, but let me see how this person thinks. Let me see if I can start to leave my own perspective and come into somebody else's world and see what makes these points, or why are they saying the things that they're saying. And then you'll also be able to back up your argument better because you understand exactly what the person is using and why they're using it.
Agreed. Absolutely. And that's, again, it's a strength that you have to do this job well, particularly in litigation aspect. And I think characterizing as empathy, that's really what it is. So I like that way you put that.
What kind of challenges, and be real as you can. I mean, I understand, you're a professional, you got a job, we're not going to mess up your job or nothing like that. We don't want to get you fired or nothing like that. Like, what has been the issues that are just common to all lawyers, or challenges that you've had common to all lawyers? And then what kind of challenges have you had in your professional career as a professional of color, being a lawyer?
Yeah, good question. So I'll speak generally initially. And I guess maybe I'll take those in reverse order. Being a Black person or a person of color first, there was a study done, I want to say in 2014, dealing with reviewing memos of associate attorneys at big law firms. And so basically what the researchers did was they took a memo, a legal piece of writing, analyzed an issue. They gave it to dozens and dozens of partners to review the memo. They told half the partners that a Black associate wrote it, half the partners that a white associate wrote it, right? Mm-hmm. The partners then reviewed it for errors. And unsurprisingly, the partners, whether white or Black, they found more errors in the memos written by Black associates than they did in the memos written by white associates, even though it was the same exact memo, right? And so it goes to show that as a Black person or a person of color, you're under a microscope in a different way. Like the expectations that you'll fail and you need to prove them wrong. So they look at your work more closely. They look at it more harshly. They, you know, even in that memo study, the memos that were supposedly written by Black people, the partners gave them written writing, and they made comments like, "Can't believe this person got into Yale," even though no one asked them to make comments, right? They weren't asked to make comments, but they felt the need to go out of their way to enlighten and give feedback to this Black associate they perceived it to be. So that kind of, you know, that's something that Black attorneys deal with, right? Like when you're judged differently than your white associates and your white peers. I will say I've been fortunate enough at the firm that I'm at here in Portland, really in my particular group. So our firm is a collection of a number of practice groups. I'm in the labor and employment group. I think maybe it's just the nature of them being employment attorneys, but they're more aware of these issues, whether white, Black, or anything else. And so it's a much more inclusive environment. I don't have to wrestle with these issues as much. But there have been times where I think early in my career, a partner had said something to me that I thought could have been handled a little differently. And I was just wrestling with it. You know, is this because I'm a lowly associate and they don't really respect us that way? Or is it because I'm the Black associate, right? And it's a phenomenon called decisional ambiguity, where Black professionals have to constantly wonder, did that happen because of my work product, or did it happen because I'm a Black person? And you lose energy, you lose emotional, it's emotionally exhausting and draining. And that's a reality of being Black, both in the law and in any professional context.
I think it's both and. I think like when I'm coaching my clients, that, you know, because I coach, you know, professionals of color, high performing professionals of color, and you know, advocates of color. But the point is that they wrestle with this, like, man, was it because I'm Black? I think the answer in most cases is yes, but it's also because you didn't write that thing right. So, like, you could have done better. Like, I try to give people the empathy to understand that you're being viewed through whiteness all the time. Like, it's not a conscious choice, like whether white people view you in a specific way or white supremacy in general. These are subconscious behaviors, because human beings aren't using their consciousness that much. Like 95% of what we're doing is 95% of our activity is in the subconscious. Only 5% is in our conscious brain. And so when somebody is looking at you or observing you and treating you in a specific way, yes, they're treating you like you're Black. But it's not. You can most definitely say that because it like it's an extension of identity. We, like, when you see somebody who's attractive to you, like, what, you know, attractive woman, doesn't matter if you consciously say, oh, I'm attracted to her. Like, things happen inside of you that show that you're attracted to that person. Your pupils dilate. Things that happen on a subconscious level that you're not even aware of. It doesn't matter what you think, and that's part of the struggle. And this is part of my enlightening, is that your conscious thoughts only matter a very small percentage of time. It's what you do subconsciously that matters in how you treat people. So you have to find those times, and you have to reprogram yourself through your conscious mind to start reprogramming those subconscious behaviors. That's why white supremacy is so difficult to deal with, is because so many of us are baffled. Like, not just Black people, but also white people are baffled, because they're like, oh, I'm not racist, or I'm not, you know, they consciously, you're probably not, but subconsciously you are. because you have the identity of whiteness already ingrained in your experience, in your behaviors, and how you see the world. And from that identity of whiteness come these behaviors of of white supremacy that are transferred. And so it's like I think I think one thing that we're really wrestling with is like, okay, well, how do we deal with that? Well, one, you have to be able to protect yourself as a professional of color, right? And I think one way you protect yourself is knowing who you are, having a bulletproof um, identity, and knowing who you are. And then part of that also is being able to understand how whiteness is going to respond to you on a regular basis, so that you're able to navigate that without being assaulted by these emotional responses that you'll have, as if it's new. Like you'll be like, oh my gosh, like everybody now is like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. This person got shot in the street. Oh my gosh, this is like no, it's not so crazy if you understand that whiteness came from the the identity of whiteness came from the domination, control, and destruction of all non-white people. You can understand the behaviors are going to follow that trajectory. So rather than being um, surprised so much, because surprise only works if you do something after the surprise. You know, we're just being surprised. Oh my gosh, this guy got shot in the street. Oh my gosh, this guy got this. This woman got fired from her job because her hair was tied up. Like what what I mean? It's we have to, as black and brown people, we have to stop being so surprised, and we need to start using that emotion. Like when we get these things that we find out that somebody just got shot in the street, we have to use that emotion to move in a direction that's going to help our people. And a lot of time we're using that emotion to vent, and that's it. We're talking about how we feel, and that's good because you're kind of getting that emotion out, but it doesn't produce anything for anybody but you. It's not advancing our people. It's not bringing us closer in unity. It's just being angry, or it's just just being frustrated. So for me, understanding how white supremacy impacts you individually and as a culture uh, is a must. And then on top of that, it's knowing yourself so that you can have a bulletproof self-image and identity, so that you can stand up in these situations and be able to navigate and maneuver without being emotionally hijacked in the process. So that's
good.
I mean, that's my little spiel to that. Is like, man, we gotta be able to understand that whiteness is an identity. It's a social position and it's an identity. And once we understand it, we don't have to make huge judgments on it necessarily, but we need to use the information to make better decisions for us and our people. That's how I feel about it.
That's deep, and I second those points. Right, like you have to understand both what whiteness is, and I love how you say a bulletproof identity. You have to know who you are, because that allows you to operate from that point, right? I didn't know how to approach people. I know what's a safe way to approach this person, what's good for my career, how to navigate these. And if I know who I am, then I know what my priorities and what my goals are, and I know what I can risk, and I know what I can't risk. And it makes that just an easier path to navigate. And it's always going to be difficult as a black person navigating, but there are things you can do when you're aware of these, like you said, aware of how whiteness works and aware of your identity. That just makes it simplifies the process as much as it can be with a complex system of whiteness. So
it is, because it's identity. This is identity. Like whenever I'm coaching, and there's some amazing books on like how we change and how we move and change management and all these different kinds of things. But the easiest way to change is through changing our identity, and then our habits come afterwards, right? It's like okay, a lot of us will want to do something like short term, we'll like want to lose weight or whatever, right? And then we're like, okay, we lose 15, 20 pounds or whatever it is, we get in the gym, and then boom, we go right back to it. We put the weight back on. It's because our identity didn't change. We have to change our identity to where it's like, okay, I'm not the type of person that eats past a certain time. I'm not the type of person that sloughs off on their workout days. I'm not the type of person. It has to do with identity, and once the identity changes, then the behavior starts changing long term. And so, like when we're talking about these, the identity of whiteness, whiteness was a social construct created to, like I said, to destroy, dominate, and control non-white people. It was a figment, but it was a figment that was reinforced by violence. So it's like, okay, well, yeah, I guess you are white. I guess you are the power. I guess you are the power. I guess you are the supreme because you just told me you're supreme, and if I don't move in this direction, then you're gonna kill me or castrate me or do something that impacts my health and wellness. So it's like, if we understand that these like this identity, and I talked a little bit about this to a few folks, which is like, if you're if you're a person, a non-melanated person or a Caucasian person, and I try to make the differentiation, so because I realize that in the struggle against white supremacy, there have always been a small remnant of non-melanated or Caucasian folks, I say, that have helped in our cause and have not, I don't really say allies, I say advocates. They've like, they've been in the trenches with us. You know what I mean? Like during the Underground Railroad, they risked some of them risked their lives. They risked their health, their safety, in order to help Black folks. So these are the people that I'm talking about, that I'm like, yeah, I'm with them. If you're a non-melanated person, or if you're a Caucasian person who wants to leave whiteness and leave the identity of whiteness, like, we can work together. We can talk. But if you want to stay in the identity of whiteness, either consciously or subconsciously, then your identity is going to brush up against me at some point, and we can only go so far.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my my bigger take on the how to strategize around the behaviors that come out from whiteness. Can you tell us a little bit about the Ahmaud? Is it
Yeah. Yeah, Ahmaud Arbery.
Mm-hmm.
Man, so I mean, I think a lot of people have really kind of learned about the story in the last couple of days. I won't pretend that I was up on it from the beginning either, but I mean, he was murdered back in February. I mean, this was 2.5, 3 months ago, late February, that he was murdered. He was out on a jog. There's a video out there. I don't recommend watching it, but it has gone viral in the last couple of days.
Mm-hmm. I saw it too. It was sad. Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough. Yeah, I'm always torn about whether to watch or not to watch. I don't recommend watching, but I did watch. But yeah, so he's out on a jog. You have these 2 white supremacists, maybe 3, who report that they see this man jogging. They're concerned that there have been a couple of robberies in the neighborhood. They thought they saw him, scoping out a house or robbing a house, and so they jump in their trucks with their guns. They follow him. They try to get him to stop. He's going about on his jog, trying to get away from them. One jumps out the car. They're armed with rifles. He understandably struggles and tries to save his life, and they execute him. There's a third man who was following in a truck and filming the whole thing, and basically blocking his exit. This happened months ago, but the video was released this week. And that sparked this national outcry, kind of a global outcry at times about, how are these men not even arrested, right? Like under Georgia's law, we should talk about having laws, laws for white people and laws for everyone else, right? Like Georgia has laws for white people, to where I guess if you are engaged in a citizen's arrest, you can then use self-defense and a number similar to the whole Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman and stand your ground laws in Florida. But yeah, the prosecutor determined that the white murderers, white supremacists acted lawfully and let them go about their day. Videos leaked, outcry happens. Now there's pressure. Now these men are arrested, and we're on a step towards the possibility of potentially getting the hope for future justice, right? Like we can't even be assured that justice will be the outcome of this,
right?
Because we've seen people murder and get off. But that's the long, short version of what's going on. Right now, we're just waiting to see what happens.
So do you think, is this process going to be, you think, several months before we find out, or could it be a year, up to a year, or how does this process kind of work?
Yeah, it could easily be a year and a half before we hear anything. I think back to the Boston Jean shooting in Dallas, where the officer coming in shot him in his apartment. That took about a little over a year to wrap up, to go through the whole legal process and a trial and then a jury verdict. So we're nowhere near a resolution. A lot of things can change in the interim, but we've taken that first step by at least arresting the people who shot this man on camera. Yeah, a no-brainer.
It's sad because me and my wife were talking about this, and it was just like we saw the video, and it was just like, wow, they hunted him down like a dog, and and they killed him, and then despite this overwhelming evidence, the systems that are in place for white supremacy are left like this in order to keep opportunities like these alive, right? So it's almost like the system moves in such a slow way on purpose in these ways. But then in other ways, when they need to potentially look for coronavirus vaccine, they're gonna allow testing earlier, and they're gonna bypass a lot of these different things in order to create a positive solution. So if my understanding is right, typically the CDC, I guess, takes a long time to be able to put in a vaccine for a particular flu or whatever the case is, whatever the disease is. And I understand it makes sense that they're making the process faster in order to save more lives, right? They're bypassing a lot of those, I guess, potential checks and standards that they normally would in order to try to get a vaccine faster. So for things that they care about as a government, they're able to make faster changes to laws and procedures and policies. But when they have to do with our life, our black and brown lives, there's nothing expedient about it. And even like how the coronavirus, how people are, like black and brown folks are being able to I'm trying to say this the right way. How we're kind of, it's like we can go back about our business, like, oh, don't worry, like you can go outside and you can do whatever, but we're still going to close down all these government buildings. Like what is that letting us know? Like that we can go out and get infected and a few more of us need to die first before like what?
Some of us are expendable,
Yeah, man. And this kind of lackluster energy towards saving our lives is consistent. It's constant. I mean, in Katrina, the same way. You see certain things like
Yeah.
that in Puerto Rico. You know, when that tragedy happened, it's just like our lives really don't matter that much in the eyes of white supremacy, and that's that social position of whiteness is the highest form of life. It's the highest form of protection. And if you don't align in that, then you just don't measure up. And that can I think that as black and brown folks, we have to really look at this as this is our time to start coming together and being united, because individually we really don't have much to bargain with.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with your point. There's no sense of urgency when it comes to Black lives, right? And I mean, I think the case with Ahmaud Arbery in the trial taking forever. I mean, part of that is just how the system's set up. You know, criminal trials they do take a while longer. But I think of, as you were saying that, I think of like Brown v. Board of Education, right? Like the case that led to the desegregation of schools, and there was a question of how soon states had to comply with these laws and open up the schools. And I can't think of the precise phrase that the Supreme Court used, but it was like with all deliberate speed, right? Like we're not going to make you act. We're not going to put any timeline on it, but just basically, you know, whatever works for you at your own pace. You know, to the southern states that have set up these systems of segregation, we trust you to kind of take care of this on your own, and you're going to handle it, right? And it's a pattern that we do see. You know, you mentioned Puerto Rico, that we see consistently when Black lives and Black bodies are at stake. That it's just, you know, look, there's no urgency, right? Like, okay, we'll admit that it's wrong if we get that far. But now in terms of resolving it, you know, we'll take our time to figure it out, right?
I mean, these are cases that they should be. And this is, I guess, why I'm not a lawyer, man, because it's just like I think it's simple. It's like, boom, you kill a dude, cold blood, 20 to life, electric chair, or like you take a life. If you take that life, your life is now taken. Boom. Like you know, if that is, you know, that to me is justice. Like if you kill somebody in cold blood on video and he's unarmed and you hunt him down, you and that person are going to jail, and you're going to spend the rest of your life in jail, if not eventually having a death penalty. Like, I think that's very, very simple. I think that's reasonable. I think living his whole life or their whole lives in jail is reasonable. Like I think that anything less than that is unreasonable to me. In my, you know, from where I'm at, we don't have enough. I mean, we're already being killed at such a high rate in so many different ways. And so I don't think we just have time to be over here like, oh, well, you know, a few more 100,000 of us can die, and then you guys can kind of be like, nah, this is.
Yeah, I gotta say just two things though. One, I'm a fan of restorative justice, so I'm not a fan of lengthy sentences at all. Even though I get like this is a bad example to make that case. These men deserve to be locked up for as long as reasonably possible. But anytime we have these harsher punishments, we know who those apply to most, right? They apply to me and you. They apply to Black people.
Yeah.
But I gotta qualify. And then the death penalty, again, for the same reason, I gotta, you know, my initial reaction is yes, these people need the death penalty. But again, when you look at how the death penalty is applied, you look at who's most likely to get the death penalty. I think it was it used to be a stat that in Texas, you were almost 7 times more likely to get the death penalty if you were a Black person who killed a white person than the alternative, right?
Okay.
You know, because they protected Black lives.
Okay.
They protected white lives. They didn't protect Black lives. And given how faulty our system is, I'm a staunch advocate for the abolition of the death penality, because we know who it's going to be used on disproportionately. I
get what you're saying. I totally understand. Because it would just end up being used against us if that was. Well, maybe they could have a clause, like a Black clause in there or something. Like if you kill a Black life and you don't have, like, you know, substantial evidence. Like you just, I don't know, like the harshness of your penalty is quick and it's immediate. I don't know, man. I don't know any policy. That's why you're there to fight for us in those areas. But just tell me about how. I mean, how do you stay motivated? How do you how do you keep your energy? How do you keep your enthusiasm? In the law when things like these happen. How do you keep going?
That is a tough question. I mean, it's hard, right? And like what I do, I do employment law. This is a civil setting. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about dollars and cents. We're not talking about lies. I'm not a public defender. I have friends who are criminal defense attorneys, and I mean, they take a lot of losses. Like the system is stacked against them to lose day in and day out.
Mm-hmm.
So I admire people who can do that and still be motivated. For me, it's not as difficult, but still, it's hard to lose faith in a system when you see the way it treats you on a daily basis. My productivity drops a lot, kind of as I'm struggling to process these things. I know just this week, learning about Ahmaud Arbery was difficult. I think about when I was studying the bar, a couple of weeks studying for the bar to become an attorney. A couple of weeks before the bar exam is when we had the shootings of Philando Castile and Alton Sterling in the same week, and I was devastated, and then had to go study for 8 hours a day. And so it's tough to do, but at the end of the day, like I have to believe, that there's a way to use the law to benefit Black people. We may not be able to fix the system, but I can use the law in ways to benefit Black people, and that what I'm doing will have a long-term effect. It's naive, but I like to think it occasionally is true.
So basically, that's the why. That's the thing that keeps you going. That's the ideal that keeps you going no matter what. Right now, in your journey, being a Black man, what are you learning about yourself?
Man, I'm right now. I'm learning that I don't have as much patience as I thought I did. I mean, truthfully, what I mean specifically is dealing with white people and dealing with whiteness. I guess I won't say white people, but dealing with whiteness in the system of white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
It's really worn down my patience, and it's I'm still learning that there's a lot of ways to go about doing this work, and ways that I may have kind of shrugged off before or thought was too aggressive or too hostile. I see merit to, and so I'm trying to be more open-minded to like the multitude of ways that we can help Black people, right? And that I may be wrong in the way I'm going about it, and how can I learn, what other people are doing it and try other tactics. So.
Well, that's huge. That being open-minded about something that's never been solved. White supremacy is undefeated. So I don't know, like so many people are like, they forget that, it's like, oh, the way we need to do this and we need to do that. Like, yeah, we probably do. We probably need to do that and some of that and some more of that too, because right now we have not found a solution, because the people in power that keep it going understand that it creates an advantage to them and their progeny and their people. And whiteness is one of those things where, because it's a social construct, um, it it's not an ethnicity of people, but those who are non-melanated continue to benefit from it. And so that benefit is the survival benefit. And what I try to teach people is that anything that has to do with survival is very, very hard to break. Anything, any idea, any concept that has to do with survival, or it connects with the primitive parts of your brain, the the subconscious, because all your subconscious is doing continually is looking for rewards and keeping you away from threats. And so within that white identity, if there's a belief in that identity that on a subconscious level, not even a conscious level, but that if they continue to keep this system alive, that they'll benefit, that their kids will benefit, that their kids will benefit. They won't have to work as hard. They won't have to. They can continue to exploit us. They can continue to degrade us and control us, and
Yep.
and profit from that, both financially profit from that, and their self-image profit from that. There's I just don't see white people as a majority. I might see subsections,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't see white people as a majority giving up that that uh, that advantage. I just don't see them doing that because it attaches to fitness, it attaches to survival, and so that's why I think it's more on us as Black and brown folks to create more collective economics, collective responsibility, that Kuji Chagalio, Ujimu, Jama, all those Kwanzaa things that we need to start really incorporating into our everyday lives, and also other people of color, and uniting us on some common language, on some common thing that hey, if this happens to you, this happens to me too, and then I
Yeah.
think we can have more bargaining chips at the table. And so I want to ask you one last question, man. There's still division between black people and black people, and then there's still division between black and brown people. We also understand that that is a symptom of white supremacy as well. But what are some of your suggestions with how we can work together? How we can build some type of interconnected community that first, of course, takes care of our own personal community, but also takes care of other brown folks as well that are struggling.
Man, if I had a great answer, I'd be on my book tour right now. I'm selling my top best-selling book on this issue. But I think so. I agree that unity is essential, and that we have to have a strong community to make progress. I also think that there's a myth about what that unity looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even in during Jim Crow and during the Civil Rights era, I mean, that wasn't the majority of Black people out changing the world. You didn't have 90%, 80% of Black people gathered, trying to change the world. You had a larger group of people, but I don't even know. I don't have the statistics in front of me. I don't even know if you had the majority. I mean, most Black people throughout all of time have just been trying to survive. They don't have time for activism. They don't have time for boycotts. They don't have time to make change, right? Dr. King talked about the difference between, racism in the South and racism in the North. And, Malcolm looked at how these, pastors in the North really were just kind of playing the game to survive and take care of their own status and their own church's status. They weren't making waves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that we're going to get this beautiful unity, I think that's a myth that almost stops progress, because we're ignoring the good to get to the perfect, and the perfect is not going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a matter of building organizations, that have influence, that have power, that have weight behind them, and identifying enough Black people to be involved and to contribute. And maybe you're not able to, be on the front lines. Maybe you don't even have the money to send an extra check, but you can promote that organization. You can get allies to support that organization financially. And it's how do we collectively use these resources and organizations to create the most influence, right? Like, again, we're not going to get 60% of Black people, on board with one thing, right? I think Obama had 70% of Black people turn out to vote for him. I don't know if we've ever had Black turnout like that before or since, right? So adjusting our expectations to what it looks like to be unified and to pull our resources together. It's not all or nothing.
So basically you're saying like that, you don't know exactly how it's going to work, but you know that a way that we can get closer to it is not having a false narrative, and not allowing a false narrative to hinder us from the progress that we are making. Is that or I don't know.
That's yeah. I mean, that is part of it. Again, I think yeah. If the goal is getting this perfect unity, and if we kind of mislead ourselves into thinking that we had that in the past, then it stops us from progressing now, right? It stops us from being able to focus on what we can change now, and it slows and impedes our process. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be working for more unity. Like, I'm not saying there's a perfect number out there, but I feel like we spend not you and I, but so many people. There's a lot of narratives out there about Black people holding Black people down because we're not supporting everyone's business, or we're not buying this product. That's never been the case, right? So we're trying to attain something that's never been achieved in order to create progress, and we just have to adjust those expectations of what we need our community to be like, right? Not adjusting expectations for what we want to achieve and dismantling white supremacy, but how do we get there, and what does our team look like? It's not going to be this grand team with 100% of Black people in it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think of the 80-20 rule again. It's like, well, how do we get the 20% of Black influencers and Black leaders and brown leaders and brown influencers? How do we get those 20% collectively united and under at least a general cause of Black and brown humanity? I think that's that. I think that has to be like a thing. Like, hey, when that happens, that's a violation of Black humanity. I can't sanction. I can't help you if you're not going to help. That cause, or if you're not going to speak out on this, if you're not going to, if you're going to ignore what's going on my end as well. And I think that's the thing about culture is like, culture is a beautiful thing. Like, culture is a person's culture is intimate. It's who they are, and um, we all have a choice. We all have a choice to allow somebody into our culture, and it's not a right. I think what white supremacy did was, it was like, it said, I have the right to take from your culture and to experience your culture. Even the term inclusion really seems um, to benefit a form of white supremacy, where it's like, okay, when we have an event, we have to have white people there, like, where it's like, or else we're not inclusive. Like, I know that that's not originally what the term was used for, but the point is that culture is not, experiencing somebody else's culture is not a right. I don't believe that at all. If a person from a different culture doesn't want me to experience their culture, they have that right. And I might have to earn it. And I think that that's part of it, is good faith. It's like, how can we start to bring in that collective good faith between Black people and African people, between African people and other Latinos, other Asian groups, other Native groups, other Pacific Islander groups. How do we create that good faith where it's like, yo, at the end of the day, we understand that white supremacy is something that is destroying the world, and that we have to stand together on this. We can't do it individually.
So I agree with that. I mean, framing this as, look, white supremacy is harming us all, right? And I mean, white supremacy harms white people, right? So individual white people are harmed by white supremacy.
Yes.
So, the idea that there's this group that's just benefiting. I mean, yeah, they benefit, but a lot of them are also being harmed, particularly disproportionately poor white people are supporting systems that are destroying them. And so how do we create, how do we get people on board with seeing the devastating harm? I mean, part of that goes back to just awareness and countering false narratives, right? Like you mentioned a lot of the divisions within black communities, which in other communities is fostered by white supremacy in and of itself, right? I mean, colorism is a problem in Black communities, but that's a result of racism and a result of white supremacy. It's not like we created this ourselves. And so, you know, tearing down false narratives has got to be a start. And then no one wants to really be the first, but I think you have to support others outside of your community without expectation of return in order for them to take that good faith step and start doing the same thing. And as Black people, we've kind of carried the civil rights movement historically in this country, and all minorities have benefited from that, from our efforts. That's a real conversation. Yeah, that's a conversation that needs to be had. But if we just say, well, we're done, we've carried this for you, we're not going to show up now. I mean, we may be morally justified, but that's not going to defeat white supremacy. That's not going to get us there. So it's us then saying, all right, well, look, here Trump is acting a fool, talking about the Wuhan and the Chinese flu. Like, that's wrong. We got to show up for you. Now we expect you to show up for us when Ahmaud Arbery, when he's shot. And I don't see the Asian brothers and sisters showing up yet. But we need you to be out there for us like we were out there for you. And those conversations need to be going on. And if we get more of that, then we get more momentum. We get a more leverage to actually start changing policies for all of us.
Man, thanks, Dex. I gotta get you on the show again, man. I gotta get you on the show again. Perspective and your insight is very, very valuable. So thank you so much. And congratulations again. This is the People Man Talks podcast. This is Emanuel Solomon, the People Man, and I'm out.